afternoon. Or is it not because it's not afternoon? Okay, so my name is Ayado. The panel member we're waiting for is there, he's getting mic. My name is Ayado Ewinyu. I am the Africa Careers Network Director. Here at African Leadership Academy. I'm going to introduce myself like...
Sorry.
Like the ALA scholar. So my name is Ayado. I come from Uganda, but I grew up in Kenya. I was born in Tanzania, so I'm East African. So I work at Africa Careers Network, like I said. And what essentially we do is we work with high potential African youth, meaning students who are coming through African Leadership Academy, as well as a cohort of MasterCard Foundation scholars in identifying employment and entrepreneurial opportunities that make them have that make them high potential leaders on the continent and are able to embrace their leadership journey. How we go about doing this is we have a full-scale model, which essentially is skills development. So in the earlier session, you had them talking about employability for employment. So we do embrace that model by providing skills development through how to look for a job, but also how to keep jobs. We also provide access to different partnerships and networks in order for them to identify opportunities that will make them thrive, both professionally, but also in the different leadership journeys that they decide to take on. Today, with me, we're going to talk about, the title of this panel is Accelerated Career Pathways for Youth in Africa. With me on the panel are three members. They'll introduce themselves, where they went to school, what they're currently doing, and then we'll have a discussion. We're going to talk about what they're doing and I'll ask them a few questions. And then I'll leave a few minutes at the end of the session for you to ask any questions. So if you have any questions, please just keep them. I'm sure they'll be willing to ask questions. And I'm also going to adopt the model of the earlier session where the moderator encouraged the panel members to ask each other questions. So we're basically just going to have a conversation. We're a small group. Again, I say I love small groups, so sit back and enjoy. Okay, so let's go. Aissatou.
All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aissatou Gaye. I am from Senegal, but currently based in Lagos. I work with an NGO called Wave Academies, one of the, at least earlier part of it. And for those who haven't heard, we identified hardworking and employed youth who won't necessarily have access to the economic opportunities, and we train them on what we call employability skills, like soft skills, transferable skills that you need to be successful in the job. So communication, problem solving, time management, and then we connect them to economic opportunities. But also around that, we're trying to bring along all of the relevant stakeholders that could really help influence the way educational systems are currently free. Yeah, so in a nutshell. And I work with in the finance department at Wave.
Hi everyone. Is it working? Okay. My name is Mbali Zondi. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Africa Office of Teach for All. And what Teach for All does is it's a network of 46 different countries that are working together to bring about educational change in their countries. And they do this by recruiting teachers for a period of 2 years. So a model similar to ALA. And then ultimately what we try to do is groom leaders that are going to be in different places all over. Like, so we encourage them not just to stay in education, but they are really in all facets of the community to really push and make change, particularly in education, to make like good opportunities for all children in the country. What do I do? In all of that, I work primarily with the early stage entrepreneurs, so people who are interested in starting movements within the Africa region.
Hello everyone, is this working?
Yes.
My name is Nick. Hello everyone, my name is Dipo. I'm from Nigeria. I work at Babangona. Babangona is an agricultural impact investment firm, and I'll talk a little bit about it. similar to what the other guys did. So basically what we're trying to solve with Babanguna is to reduce the rate of unemployment in the country, I think a large continent. Because I think over the past 10 years, at least Nigeria has seen various waves of youth restlessness that has led to crisis. And so Babanguna was started with the idea of improving job opportunities for young people. So currently we currently work with about 30,000 smallholder farmers. And so what we do is we provide them with credit inputs to pretty much increase their yield by about 3 times, which also translates to increased income. And then now we're in the phase of what do we provide for these farmers, what services we provide these farmers that they could spend their extra income on. The goal, I think, by 2025 is to get to 1 million farmers. So what I basically do, I'm the chief of staff of the company, and basically what we're trying to do is drive efficiencies and set in the structures and processes that enable us to scale to 1 million farmers by 2025.
Okay. So I usually say there are many others in this room in terms of alumni. I usually say I have the best job in the world, and I'm sorry for the rest of you, but I clearly have the best job in the world because I get to work with this group of people. And I know a lot about them, but I'm almost just going to take a step back in order to draw a picture of what their pathways have been. So Dipo and Mbali, the two of you have just said chief of staff. When did you graduate from university?
2014.
Say 2014.
Yeah, we're in the same class.
Okay, so 2014. So paint a picture for me, help me understand. So 2014, now this is 2018, about let's say 3 years, let me give you 3 years. Now you're chief of staff. Sounds like a big, bougie, nice, very nice word. Help me understand what your journey has been getting to this point and what some of the lessons have been. So let's start with what your journey has been. Did you do internships? Did you go to university? What is your life? How would you say this is? So you've said this is Dipo. I am this. What was your life before you became this big person, chief of staff?
So I'll just go through very briefly. So I think the journey started right when I got into college, right? I think generally for me, of course, I went to school in Nigeria, and I did actually do the year of university there. But generally, the norm is for people to only do internships when they're in their final year or the year before the final year. So getting into college, I think ACN I just started because we were the first class. And I think ACN I just started, and I still wasn't used to it, right? I think my freshman year, I went up to Kosovo to do some peace and conflict resolution. My second year, that was when I said, look, let me try and do something else. Because, of course, I didn't have that many people to stay with in the States. And I figured out, during the summer period, I needed to either find a way to earn money or go back home and find someone to pay for it. So that was the genesis. And I think then I applied to the company I'm actually currently working at then. So I applied through ACN, I got in, I was an intern there. And then it was still in like the early foundation. Right? So I think after that experience, I sort of keyed into that, look, college was a period in time where I could get internships to figure out what kind of job I wanted to do after college. Right? So I did another internship with General Electric in my junior year. And then afterwards I got a job with Bain & Company coming out of college. Right? After Bain & Company, I think with consulting you sort of get the basic skill sets that allows you to sift out the noise and focus on what's important in terms of driving towards an answer. And then after doing that for 2 years, I figured out, look, I've gotten all the skills I thought I'd gotten. Where do I want to apply them? Where do I want to apply it to? And so there was a company I'd also interned in prior to working with Bain, which is African Courier Express. And at the point they told me they were looking for a country manager and wanted me to come back to do it. And so I did that for some time, and then after that it was, look, we've done this for a while. What is the next opportunity to scale? And I mean, working with, so at ACE I was working with over 125 employees I was managing. And next skill is now you're coming to do that for 30,000 farmers, right? So it was a step change. That's how I thought through it at the point. But the internships definitely played a crucial part in me understanding what kind of roles or what kind of experience I wanted post-college. If I didn't have it, I'd pretty much be jumping in and testing at that point. But after graduation from college, I had a strong idea of where I knew I would thrive and where I knew I wouldn't. And so I just tried to focus my energies on getting into places I knew I'd thrive. So the internships played a pretty big experience, or pretty big factor in determining where I worked after college.
Yeah, I think mine is actually pretty similar. I don't think I was as conscious as Dipo about getting internships. Chris Bradford needed people to start up the alumni sort of department of ALA. And then he said, what are you doing between the summer of graduating ALA and like starting college? And I said, I don't know, I was just gonna gather some things, buy some winter clothes. I went to school in Columbia and I was like, it's gonna be freezing, New York is really cold, that's what I wanna be doing. And then he's like, why don't you plan this year's Indaba? I'm like, what is the Indaba? And so essentially that was really my first job, that internship that I spent with him. And I think that's when for me it kind of clicked that experiences were actually the best way that I learned. And so from then on, I actually even had internships while I was in school. So I interned for NBC Universal, and I was working at Rockefeller Center for the VP of News at NBC. And so that experience was just like very, it was literally like being thrown in the deep end where people didn't even understand my accent. And my boss would be like, can somebody tell her that I need her to do this? So that, and at the time, actually, throughout my whole ALA career, even applying for colleges, I was interested in journalism. And so I always thought that I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a journalist, I'm doing this internship while I'm also balancing school, because that's really what I wanted to do. And I think I only lasted for 2 semesters at the internship before people decided they really couldn't hear me and I was really tired. And I think post that I started to be involved in, I realized that operations is something that I thrive and love. So the operations of a business, how can we make things more efficient? And then a big part of it also was impact, who was I touching, who was I speaking to? And I think that really was the decisions that led me to all of the different internships that I did, interning with the Mandela Institute for Development Studies, working with Grasha Michelle, helping her to think tank of what are ways that we can be thinking about how can we measure good impact on the African continent using African diagnostics and not external diagnostics. I worked for a company where I was the country coordinator of a study abroad experience where I met a lot of, and I think primarily for me it was it's like being at college again, but actually also still being in South Africa and showing people my country. But again, I was in operations. And then I started to see that there's actually a pattern in all of these things, and the pattern was education. And I see Amy in the audience, and I'm sure, 2 years ago, she saw me, she's like, you're in education? I'm sure her and Ed were just blown away that that's how my career path ended. But before I joined Teach for All, I started working for Nova Pioneer. And my initial job at Nova Pioneer was to hire, when I walked in, they said, we need 25 teachers in the next 3 months. Do you think you could help us do that? And I was like, yes. And by the 3 months, I was hiring the entire staff across Kenya and South Africa. And so I think for me, being on the job is what's really accelerated my skills and building them. And was there some method to the madness of the path? No. It was just talking to a whole bunch of different people and them intersecting at different parts of my life that has led me to this now chief of staff role.
So that's interesting to see in terms of the common theme. So you planned, you did not plan, but you almost arrived at the same point.
Well done, Dipo.
But it's also understanding what the role of internships are in helping you both think about the education and the path that the subjects potentially that you're going to take, but also internships informing what the next steps are. And I'm hearing that very clearly from the two of you. So Aissatou, let's think about, this is your first job. You're relatively, these are the older ones, and you're our baby. So let's think about so let's think about where you are right now. You also did internships, and then you got into this first job. Was it in your home country? Where were you coming from? Give me a bit of background.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I just like to borrow from whatever you guys said before. From the earlier session, one of the panelists said, define learning in threefold, right? Learning how to be, learning how to know, and learning how to do. And like throughout my educational pathway, I was just kind of like just constantly thinking about, okay, well, this thing I'm learning right now, what will it help me do afterward? Like, what's the relevance of it? And for me, internship were really the catalyzer, if I can use that word. Because like it allowed me to just identify those three in one, right? So it just sort of switched my focus on it's not as much as the job that you're doing or the subject that you're learning, but more about the specific skills that you'll gain from each of those different experiences. And just being able to be exposed, because like you said earlier, I mean, I come from Senegal. And I mean, I had my first internship after my first year of LA. And I remember when I was telling my parents that I'm looking for internship, like, oh, are you sure? Don't you want to just use the summer to study and prepare for the next school year? So it's really not a culture to start interning on, but it really helped me just define at an earlier stage that, okay, well, you know, these are the skills that I wanted to develop, and these are the type of jobs that could help me, no matter what the experience or how long it will be, that will help me get there. And they were relevant in helping me get to the place right now I am at. Like I mentioned earlier, I work with Wave, and I work in the finance department. Well, I joined in when really like it was not really structured, so I remember the first task I was given was, okay, well, go ahead and do budgeting. Fresh out of school with my minor economic degree, I was blown up. But just because I've had, you know, I sort of had the confidence that, you know what, it's not what you know at this stage, but it's how willing are you to get what you don't know, how willing are you to learn, and how willing are you to do that makes a difference. So that was really, really key.
Okay. And so let's think about the different opportunities that you found. So in the earlier session, one of the things that was raised is people looking for opportunities and going online and applying for opportunities. And in my head, when you apply for opportunities online, more often than not, it goes into like a black hole. How did you go about identifying these opportunities? Did you call companies? Did you apply for these opportunities? Did you tap into networks? What was that like?
Well, for me, ACN was key. And it was really the sort of middleman, if I can coin it that way. And just being able to have visibility on the various opportunities that you could get on. And not only like in the country that you're in, but like across different countries and different skills that they were looking for. So that was really, really helpful to get access to and get the experience that was needed. So for me, like, I'll say ACN was key.
So the reason why I asked the question is, again, I keep borrowing from the earlier session because it was a very nice segue into this one. One of the statistics that was given was that there are 8 million people graduating from university every year. I don't even know where they're going to get jobs. On ACN, we deal with a smaller pool of those. So every year we have, on average, about 230, 240, both African Leadership Academy students as well as MasterCard Foundation scholars. And every year we're also asking ourselves this question: where are we going to get these jobs? Currently on the continent, can I comfortably say that the class that's graduating this year is that we have 236 jobs available for them? So we take on different approaches, and I think, Dipo, I'd really like to hear how, because you spoke about the companies that you intern for, are there any of those that have come back or hired you? How did you go about taking advantage of previous placements in terms of internships? And how's that going for you?
Yeah, that's funny enough. I mean, aside Bain, I think all the companies I've worked for, I previously did an internship. So I mean, of course, I think when I was in school, there were 2 ways to get the internship, right? The first was through recruiting. My school, students were heavily recruited, but most of those opportunities were in the States, right? So ACN was the portal to say, look, if I wanted to go back to the continent to do some work, I could at least get good opportunities there. So the first one was Dorio Partners, and I think initially I applied because it was agriculture based, right? So I was really interested in agriculture. I got in there, like I said earlier, it was really early stage. And to be honest, it was just a lot of grit, right? It wasn't like a fancy internship, the company wasn't that fancy at that time, but I just focused really on the experience I wanted to get on, right? So there was a lot of sacrifices, at least in hindsight, that I made to at least make sure that when I was leaving the internship, the guys I worked for would be interested in potentially hiring me down the line. So that's keeping up with deadlines, doing the work to a certain degree of quality. I think most importantly, showing that you're teachable and you want to learn. Because at that stage, you don't really know anything, frankly. And so the other one was Africa Career Express, right? When I graduated, I was going to come back, but I had issues with immigration, which we'll touch on later. And so knew I was going to go back to Nigeria. I was like, for this 6 months while I was applying for my South African visa, what would I be doing there, right? Got some connections, got to Africa Career Express, and it was just the same thing, right? At that point, I'd finished from an Ivy League school, I was going back and I was earning like maybe 200, 250 USD a month, right? So it wasn't an ideal thing you think in your head what you want to do after spending so much money through school. But of course, I think it was still the same. Look, great, get in there, get your hands dirty, learn a lot, and create a good impression so you could always fall back. And so when I left to go to Bain, I was very clear. I think this is probably the part of my career that was very clear to me. I knew I didn't want to be a long-term consultant. It's not that much. But I knew there were a bunch of key skill sets you can get from working in corporates, but also working in consulting. Right? So there's a lot of data. How do you analyze it? How do you drill down? How do you become 80-20? How do you learn how to communicate well to senior management and then also to people you're sort of managing? And so it was very clear to me what skill sets I wanted to work with. So towards the end of the time, I felt, look, I'd gotten a hang of the base of this. I just reached out to former employers, right? And key also, I think I skipped this part, was while I was at Bain, I was still keeping tabs. Right? So it was not like I left to Bain and there was a 2-year black hole and then surprise, I'm looking for a job. I'd always reach out to and say, look, let's get coffee, let's get coffee, let's get lunch, and let's talk, right? So at least they still had me top of mind. Like, okay, fine, this guy's this. And so when I reached out to say, look, I was looking for an opportunity, I'd pretty much already carved out what sort of role I wanted them to see me play, right? So leaving Bain, definitely when I was at ACE, initially I was the operations manager there. I told them, look, coming back, I'm looking to get more experience beyond managing the operations. I wanted to do a lot more HR, raising funds and everything. So it was a country manager position I was looking at, right? And so then I got the chance, at least the opportunity to manage a lot more people and actually know what it feels like to run a business. And then post ACE, I also reached out to Kola, who I worked with at Dorio Partners. And then for me, it was scale, right? At the point where I was working with Barango when I was intern, they had 100 farms, right? It's a decent scale. But now coming back, it's 30,000 we're doing this year, right? So for me, it was, look, I had worked at ACE for some time, but that was scale. And so because I kept tabs with him and knew what phase the company was, I was able to pitch that for the goal I wanted there. So of course, internships gave me the in-way to these companies, but I always kept tabs with the guys, and then when I thought I needed to move on to the next level, I always reached out to see what opportunities existed there with those companies.
Do any of you share the same perspective? Or a different perspective?
Yeah, I'd like to ask you a question. As a time goes. I love the fact that there was at any point in time agency, but also this level of self-awareness throughout everything you described. And I just wanted to know, you were pretty aware of these orders. At this point in time, this is what I want to learn. But how did you know, you've gotten enough to what you wanted to learn, and now is the time for the next one?
Yeah. So for consulting, it was pretty straightforward. I enjoy the experiences and the people I worked with, but I think after a while, it sort of dawned on me that, look, I don't want to keep on. Making PowerPoints is really great. I made a lot of it. I think I never really felt like I'd learned enough, because the way consulting professional development does is almost every 3 months, there's always the next level of learning for you to get to. And so I looked at all the buckets that I've done for the past 18 months and said, look, what skills have I checked off on that these guys think I've learned enough to promote me? Because I think I got promoted right after I left. And so I looked at the boxes and I said, okay, look, this guy has checked the analysis box. This guy has checked the communication box. And then I looked at, okay, look, what opportunities do I want that I can actually take the skill sets and apply to? I honestly don't think I've gotten all I could have gotten out of consulting. If I stayed for 2 more years, that would have been a completely different ballgame. But because I wasn't enjoying the job itself for too long, I just looked at, look, this is the bare minimum stuff I can get out, and where can I apply this to? So I think Mbali hinted at this. It's very easy to say this in hindsight, but it doesn't capture the permutations and combinations that are going into your head when I was making the decision. Because I mean, at that point in time, it's not clear. Like you're literally just threading the wheel, like threading the water, like you just want to stay afloat. It wasn't too clear, but in hindsight, I could sort of see. But at that point in time, it was a very tough decision. I mean, consulting pays pretty well. The longer you stay, the more valued you are outside. And even after just 2 years, came with a lot of unanswered questions. Hey, I think with jobs, I err on the side of risk. I said, look, I'm still young. If anything happens, I can always repivot after business school. Right? If I fail, I can always try again to business school and repivot. So that knowledge of knowing that even if things didn't go into plan, there's still a checkpoint I could repivot made me more risk averse. Post B school or down the line, I'm not sure how that would play, but at least now I knew that mentally I had like 3-4 years to make all the mistakes I wanted to make. And after business school, I'll probably get back into consulting, even if it didn't work out. But yeah, I think that's how I thought about it.
Okay, so we've heard that internships were a way for you to keep connected to the continent during your studies outside of the continent, so keeping connected to Africa. And internships also were a way for you to get employment opportunities because it's not a completely linear path in terms of looking for opportunities and identifying them. And you also touched on the fact that the importance of relationships and networks. And you've basically all spoken about how great your internship experiences were. Is there any time that you walked into an organization and you're doing an internship, no need to mention names, you're doing an internship and you walk in and ideally when you think of an internship, it should be structured or thereabouts. Although we are rethinking that, is there a time when you walked into an organization and you're like, oh my word, what's this? What have I just walked into? And what did you do if there's a time like that?
That's always. I think that's, in my experience, that's always, it's not even internships, it's jobs. I've had instances where I have applied for jobs, interviewed for 3, 4, 5, 6, sometimes sessions, and then when I have accepted the position, they're like, actually this person also left, so you're gonna have to figure out how to do both of these jobs. So I think that's a really common thing. I think one of the things that I've learned over time is that stepping into the position, it's like now one of my favorite phases of any job, like of being in any company, for a couple of reasons. One, you have a lot of time to just like be the new person, and you can make so many mistakes under the guise of, I'm still new. And during that time, I say I'm still new for as long as I can push it, like even a year, I still say I'm still new. But I think what I'm really doing is sort of really feeling the organization, what is really ultimately driving them. Culture is something that you can try ask some questions when you're being interviewed, but when you're actually in the organization, that's something that personally for me is so important. Like, what's the culture like? Is it a learning culture? Do I actually have to stay in this certain lane? Am I going to be allowed to maneuver? How can I maneuver? And so I think like walking in and having sort of like that framework of thinking like, for the next couple of months, I'm really just going to learn how this place works. And I think after that, it's really sneaky. I almost redefine what the job is. And I start showing in very concrete ways, these are some of my really top skills. Maybe you didn't really hire me to do some of these things. I'm gonna do my job and I'm gonna do it really well, but I'm also gonna do these other things so that you can see that this is actually my full skill set. So by the end of the first year, they're like, hey, wait, you're actually really good at that stuff, and then you kind of walk away with a new job description. So that's been like my sort of experience, is that people always, I mean, there's always a need, and I think with millennials, people always think that you walk into a job and you say, I want to be the CEO tomorrow. And I don't think that's really the case. I think with millennials, you really want to bring your whole self to work. And what Dipo was saying, I'm like, I never really knew when it was time for me to move on or whether it was appropriate. It always feels risky when you leave. But I think what ultimately pushes you to make that decision is, are you still passionate about what you're doing? Are you still waking up in the morning saying, this is it, this is where I'm meant to be, and this is what I'm meant to be doing? And so I think just having sort of like that orientation, Ayado, really helps when you walk into a situation where it's either an internship and it doesn't turn out to be what you want it to be. But like my overall thinking is that nobody knows my whole self and nobody can figure out my whole self in 3 interviews. And so I have to show them when I arrive and then ultimately see where do I fit into this huge puzzle of what they're trying to do. And so that's just like my orientation, whether it's a bad experience, a good experience, what I expected, what I didn't expect.
So I'm going to ask each of you, Aissatou and Dipo, one last question, and then we'll get questions from the audience. So what would you tell your younger self, Aissatou? So in this room, there's a mix of both alumni, but also current ALA students. Thinking through what their pathways are, what advice would you give them? 3 things that you tell them.
3 things? Okay. Just thinking back, I think the key thing is, I mean, at some point in my life, I tended to be just really refrain myself on, okay, well, these are the type of experiences I wanted to get. But, I mean, it's good, but I think also being open to just explore, because really it doesn't matter what type of experience you get at the end, but what really matters is what you make out of it. And if you're able to realize that and just, you know, get value wherever you find yourself at, it will make you go a long way.
Dipo, so you keep talking about scale and the number of farmers that you're working with. How are you giving back both to your younger sisters and brothers, but also to people who have not been privileged to get the education and exposure and experiences that you've had?
So, I mean, I think with the farmers, right? It's and I think this is one of the reasons I also made the switch. Is this gap? I mean, first of all, improving their yield significantly. So, for example, the average yield of a farmer in Nigeria will be like 1.2 metric tons per hectare, and at least once they join the program, they get up to 4.5, right? And then the question is, these guys are making all this extra income. What do they do with it? So you could literally, in the communities we serve, walk in there and know which farmers are farming on their own and which ones are farming with the company. You could tell by the roof, the roofing, right? Some people still have the mud ones. Some people have the zinc roofs now. You can tell by where their kids go to school. But then I guess the question for us is, what other services can we provide for people to then spend the money? In terms of, I guess, so that's giving back to community on one level, through the job. To be honest, Frank, I barely have enough time to breathe outside the job. But otherwise, I think over the past years, at least in the companies I've worked with, I've been very, very focused on how do we get other guys into it. So we pretty much, while I was at ACE, we pretty much got a few ALU students coming. This year, I think we're trying to get 2 ALU students that are still within ALA and 2 that universities come to the internships. Because I think for me, that's providing the same platform I had while I was in school is one way to give back, and then people will figure it out. There's something in Mbali that I also wanted to touch on in terms of the getting into a job and not knowing, like, it not being what you wanted. I think there are two ways, right? When you're a student, look, it's completely, you take it completely differently from when it's a job. Look, if I got a job now and I got it and it wasn't what I wanted to be, in my head I know, look, I still have to stay here for 6 months to a year. Right? Someone's going to pay the bills. I'm not going to quit the next day because, hey, you told me to do this while it wasn't in my job description. But I think for internships, we get the sense that, look, hey, it's just 3 months. If I show up and I don't really like it, I could walk out the door. Because there were some internships I did also that I got into and I was like, look, this is not really what I wanted. And there were times where, to be honest, I spoken to my ACN guys and I was almost saying, look, if this doesn't change next week, I'm gonna leave because I don't think I'm getting the experience. But I think it's just important to stick through it. Sometimes you learn stuff, you don't really know what you're learning, it only makes sense afterwards. And I think just at that stage, especially when, how old were we? 20, 21, 22, maybe for the older ones. You think you really know what you want, and you think you can plan so much ahead forward. You're like, look, I want to get this from this and this from that. But it doesn't always work that way. And if it doesn't work, I think just focus on what you could learn there, because most times you don't know how it's going to come back. So I'll say, look, for the yearly guys, you will still get lots of internships that don't make sense. I don't want to just make it sound like, hey, all our internships make sense at that point. But it's just important sticking it out, because things always come back full circle. Yeah, I think I said to say everything in terms of what I want the younger generations.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? We have some time to get, yes?
When I realized that when I was doing internships, wonderful. Okay, I realized that when I was doing internships, I did nothing closer to what I was actually studying, and now I have a job. But I'm now doing what I kind of studied, but I don't enjoy it. So how do you switch from what you are academically qualified for, that you don't like, to actually doing something that you enjoy but are not academically qualified for because of past experience with internships?
I'm a good example of that. I studied economics. I haven't done anything with economics. I think the biggest thing is on, first of all, your CV. You don't have to frame it in such a way that you need to think of it as telling you a story and what you're passionate about. So if you have that outlook as you think about, like, this is the first, if you think about it, this is the first thing that people see about you before they offer you any kind of job. So how can you do that? Do you write a paragraph in the beginning of it to explain that this is now your new passion? When you get a chance to have that first interview, do you really push forward that, this is what I studied, but actually this is what I'm really passionate about, or what I want to try doing? And I think just being like super honest too, and saying like, this is going to be new for me. I want to jump into this. You guys could be the people who give me that opportunity. It's really exciting for employers. And then secondly, there are a host of skill sets that you probably possess that could be transferable to any other place that you want to work. And so thinking critically about what that skill set is, and then looking for jobs that really match that, because it's hard for an employer to say, like, if you have been doing spreadsheets for a really long time, but you're just gonna, like for me, I went into recruiting and I was doing spreadsheets again, but not in the same way that you would typically in an economic sort of job. So I think just putting that out there for some employers, it's really important to sort of just like frame your skills really well. And I would say that's it, and try to be in the circles of where you want to move into. The more people you can meet that are in those circles, starting to get yourself immersed into sort of like what is happening in the space at the time, can also get you to where you want to be.
Yes, we'll take 2 more questions and then we're done.
Thank you. My name is Tich. I've got one question. You, as the solution bearers, I take your solution bearers because you've managed to charter a new franchise, is that when it comes to the part that you've gone through, there's an issue of mentorship as receiver and a giver of mentorship. How would you be able to pass on the experience that you've gone through and also be able to receive from the industries that your businesses are operating from, so that we have a consistent, ongoing program that other youths that are coming after you can also benefit from? Thank you.
I think it's the mentorship part. To be honest, I haven't done, except testing it on my siblings. I haven't done too much. It's good there you give bare good advice and you take it. But I think, of course, we could do a better job. I don't think, especially within the ALA community. Outside the ALA community, I generally see the colleagues I work with as long term. I don't box them into, look, I'm trying to get the best I can get out of this guy, and if this guy lives, look, he's on his own journey. So I think I've done a lot of mentorship with the colleagues I work with, or the guys that I supervise. The one I know I haven't done too much, which probably should focus on is the ALA kids, right? So we probably meet during the indabas every now and then for drinks, but I think there could be a more structured mentoring or mentorship program where you actually speak to guys who are either applying to where you apply to, or when they get into college, pretty much buddy you up with them to sort of guide them through that period. I don't think I've done it in a structured way. There are a couple ALA students that I still speak to that are still in the academy, but I don't think it's been very structured. So in that way, I say, look, I'll be very honest, I haven't given back in a structured way in that regard, but I think it's important for the cycle to go through, because you don't want people, ideally, you don't want them to go through the same things you went through to learn what you learned. If there's stuff you could actually pass down to make them jump that phase, you want to. But I think within the context of ALA, I probably haven't done, personally, I don't know what it is, personally done enough to sort of give back in that particular way.
So I can add to what he said, having the role that I do and working with the over 2,000 students that I work with, there's different components of the programming that we usually call on to the alumni to help us with. And key to that particularly is, if you think of, we're a team of 5 people and there's no way we can properly touch the lives of the 2,000. So frequently we do call upon the alumni, may not necessarily be these ones, Dipo has owned his own, but we usually call upon them to help us like with interviewing, or when we're having things like barazas, which are essentially professional development conferences, they usually come to run sessions and help us to educate the cohort that are coming. So mentorship in that way, and in different levels across different, also availability with the alumni that we work with.
Yeah, and I think one last thing I would say about that is, I like your framing of how do we still learn and how do we give back. I don't think that I would categorize anything that I have done with ALA or alumni as really a mentorship. I really just see it as a relationship. Like, I'm looking at Musa in the audience, who was part of our inaugural class, and I just think of like just Musa and I overlapped in an organization once, and like it's a constant thing. It's relationships that we have where someone will come with the issue at the time, or we're both working at the same place and we're like, you know what, this needs to be a project that we're both working on. So I think I also look at it almost informally, not really as like a mentor and mentee son relationship, but just like how do we sustain the relationships such that we're always building each other up and still learning. And I love it in the most like informal form, and not really just like arriving and be like, hey kids, in this class, here's what I learned. So yeah, I think that's like one avenue that's pretty big around here that we don't always sort of highlight here.
Just one more, and then one person will answer. And then
all right, okay. Congratulations to you all, having gone through ALA and then through college and now working. I just wanted to know how ALA, your experience here with the curriculum and everything, and most especially with ALA values. How are these values playing out? Values of humility, excellence, compassion, and the rest. How are these playing out in your roles now as graduates?
I'm going to be strict and just ask one person to answer that.
All right, good. This is corny, but I like to think of ALA as really just a life-changing experience for me. Coming from a background where you are, as a young person, not necessarily given a voice or just opportunity to act, and being thrown into an environment where really just that's your story, act, speak out. And whatever you do with integrity and do it to the best of your capacity. was key and was something that I take away wherever I go all throughout my experience. Just reflecting back to what Uncle Akim had said earlier during his speech, because we're given such empowering and enabling environment. We should not dare to just go the ordinary route. So just that strong belief of do it to the best of your ability and make sure you tag along as well people that will help you do it. That's it.
I think that she's almost taken the words out of my mouth in terms of like a summary. Your path is not ordinary. I think just by virtue of the fact that you have access to the different things that you have. I want to thank you very much for taking the time from various places to come in to have this discussion. And thank you very much also for joining us for this discussion. Have a lovely day.